Good evening, everyone. Good evening. It's your host, Danny Dhaiphong, and we have a very special program for you this evening. I'm just going to get Rockfin going. Hello to all the Rockfin folks. Rumble should be coming live very soon. With all that said, though, the best way to support this program is hitting the like button as we go live here. That helps boost the stream in the algorithm. We have a lot to cover because a lot has happened over the last several days. And to do this, I'm going to introduce two very special guests, returning guests, friend of the show, and just friends and comrades in general. We have first Margaret Kimberley, the executive editor of Black Agenda Report. Hi, Margaret. How are you doing today?
I'm great. It's good to be back.
It's great to see you again. And then we have Garland Nixon, independent journalist. You can find his show on YouTube in the video description, as well as Black Agenda Report for Margaret in the video description. Garland, how are you doing?
Just wonderful. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. It's good to see you both back here. Well, let us get started because there's a lot of developments that have occurred worldwide as well as domestically. I'm sure we're going to be making all of the connections today, but let's start, of course, with the horrific terrorist attack that Israel conducted in Lebanon over the past few days. That would be Wednesday, September 18th, and it began September 17th, the Tuesday, where thousands of pagers were detonated. Israel, according to ABC, infiltrated the supply chain, was actually involved. Its intelligence operatives were involved in the production process. Many have been killed by this, over 30, and there have been children killed. And Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, has declared a state of war. Israel is now bombing Lebanon to an increased degree, saying that they are in a new phase of this war. Maybe we can bring you in, Margaret, first. What do you make of all this and where this is all going? Because we have all been covering what's happening in West Asia, Gaza, and it seems to me that things keep escalating, and that regional war that everyone is very worried about worldwide appears much closer.
Yeah, well, thanks, Danny. Israel is continuing to try to get the United States to attack Iran in particular, but to be involved in a wider war. They've taken it to Lebanon. They've taken it to Syria. And so that's the first thing. If in case anybody's like, why would they do this now? They need U.S. help. They need U.S. military help. They cannot defeat Hamas. It's almost a month now since this war, this genocide, the war crimes have been going on. And Israel wants Iran. They've wanted, I don't know how many administrations now, they've wanted the U.S. to attack. So they're hoping to goad Hezbollah, to goad Iran. We've been waiting for some kind of Iranian retaliation for the assassination of the Hamas leader who was in Iran at the time. So that's why this is going on. But it's a war crime, and it's sickening to see people think this is cool, like a James Bond movie, that people were killed. Who carries pagers now? Doctors and nurses, for the most part. That they killed medical professionals, killed patients. And what does the ICC do? What does the ICJ do? These international organizations that are supposed to maintain international law, when it comes to Israel, they are useless. So the ICC will do what the US says and declare Putin a war criminal and issue an arrest warrant for him. And there's still nothing for Netanyahu or any of his top people who have, for the past year, bragged about their war crimes. It's the most visible, most documented genocide, I think, in history. So those are my initial thoughts on this.
Garland.
Well, Margaret's covered it so well, so I'll add a couple of other things to this. Then I'll go from a little different perspective because I can't think of anything more to add regionally regarding the regional war issues. I'll say this is also interesting. I think that there will be significant fallout regarding Western technology. I would imagine right now that, like me, I'm looking at my cell phone thinking, holy crap, you know what I mean? Am I walking around with a bomb? People are going in the West and people in the global South really are all going to look at Western technology and say, if you're building, for instance, the Sahel region in Africa, and they're trying to build a security agreement. They're trying to build a security team so they can kind of huddle their countries together and protect themselves from Western imperialism. They have to now be looking, saying, oh, crap. Let's call Huawei. Let's look at some of the global South trustworthy companies that we can buy technology from, whether it's computers, phones, or whatever, because if we buy Western technology, they can blow us up on any given day. So I think that it is, I'm not going to say a good thing. It is a revealing thing for a lot of countries in the global South, outside of the sphere of U.S. and European imperialism, to understand now that that is an in for the imperialists, that they can use your phones, your computers, or whatever. So when they're putting together their security teams, their government teams, whatever, they're going to have to now say, you know what, we can't buy this Motorola, ICOM, US made in Taiwan crap anymore, because we're walking around with, basically a bomb, and inroads from the imperialist.
Yeah, and on this front, you have the Taiwan-based company Apollo Gold saying that they subcontracted to a Hungarian company, BAC, and that company is now being scrutinized because the ABC has reported that Israel was directly involved in this production process, that Mossad had their hands in it, many intelligence operatives. And this is coming from the United States. But yet, and I'm just going to play this video from the spokesperson, or one of the spokespersons of the national security spokespeople, John Kirby. Here's what he had to say about the incident, similar to how Israel consistently denies any involvement in these kind of attacks, although this time it is impossible to deny, and they've been actually very open. The United States is the one that is claiming deniability here.
Our sources have confirmed to us, it's been widely reported that Israel is responsible for this, but notably you still won't say that. Why is that? Is it because that's not your assessment, or because you don't support what they're doing here?
It's because I don't have anything more to add on this issue. As I said, there was no U.S. involvement, and I'm not going to go beyond that today.
Then let me ask this. These kinds of tactics, blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies, is this type of warfare acceptable to the United States?
Again, Mary, I appreciate the question. I'm simply not going to be able to address these incidents over the last couple of days in any level of detail one way or another.
So that's what you get. But on the war front, you have, of course, Israel conducting increased bombings, Margaret, but you also have this reality that I think is setting in, which is Israel and the United States are caught in a long war. Hassan Nasrallah said this in his speech today. He said that this is a war of attrition that is actually working out in favor of the Palestinian people, because it is one of the fronts that Israel simply cannot figure out. And that is part of the reason why they are doing these kind of monstrous attacks. What do you have to say about those comments, and also the wider reality of what is happening here? You said yourself that Israel has not been able to defeat Hamas, and Hamas is far, far, far weaker organizationally and militarily than Hezbollah or a lot of these other resistance forces.
Well, there's also a kind of unreality to it. I mean, we've been seeing this month after month, the starvation, the maiming, the killing, the children, the non-combatants killed, the rapes, all of these things, the torture, all of it, they're very open about it. And yet it continues on. The force with the the U.S. is the only power that can stop it, but they won't. So Israel sometimes, I think, leads the U.S. by the nose. So they just to make sure that they don't step out of line with even the tiniest bit of criticism, they will blow people up in Lebanon. So it's unreal. And then you have these spokespeople like this Kirby person who, it doesn't matter how horrible the action, it's the same answer. We're going to ask Israel about it, or we don't know much about it. And here we are, the country that Israel would not even exist without, that Israel could not carry out these crimes without, that Netanyahu's spoken to Congress 4 times. Why does any foreign leader need to speak to Congress 4 times? And we all saw it, jumping up and down, standing ovations, clapping like trained seals. And so there's this unreality. And then, you know, they'll say, Kamala Harris will say, too many Palestinians have died, as if there's a good number of Palestinians who can die. I'm working for a ceasefire, but no, I'll keep giving Israel weapons, which means you're not working towards a ceasefire. So there's an unreality to it as well, as if they want us to doubt what we have been seeing. And of course, the people who stand up are being repressed. So it's unreal. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but I just want to, this obstruction and this support for crimes that we're supposed to ignore. We're supposed to vote for Kamala Harris anyway. Trump doesn't pretend, but Kamala Harris does, and you're scolded if you don't, if you say genocide's a red line. So I'm feeling a kind of an unreality with this as well.
Garland.
Yeah, let me add this. I mean, one of the things you have to understand, and I'll recommend for people who want to understand what the resistance is doing. I love to read a million books. Here's an interesting one, and it's called People's War, People's Army, the Viet Cong Insurrection Manual for Underdeveloped Countries. It's by General Diop, the guy who defeated the French, ran the French out of what was then French Indochina, but it certainly was Vietnam. And basically, when you watch this, it's like they read that manual and they're going bit by bit. They're controlling the thing that the resistance forces are doing is they are controlling the escalation. Israel is desperate for an escalation. Their perspective is, look, if we can get a big fight and we can drag the United States in, that's the only way that we can fight. We can fight you if it's a big battle with a big front and we drag the United States and all of NATO in it. That's our style. And then we have a chance. And the resistance forces are saying, no, we will fight our style, which is slow with continuous pressure on them. Certainly there's going to be a lot of casualties, but I think that the resistance people also realize that in the style of the West, there'll be millions and millions of more casualties, because then they'll just be able to go city after city after city, bomb and flatten all the cities they want, use nuclear weapons, whatever the case may be. So I think they're controlling the level of escalation, maintaining it at a level that they can control. And I think that it's frustrating the Israelis, because every time they move and they say, okay, if we do this, we know the resistance forces will do that. The resistance forces, they kind of hold back and they punch when they want to punch and they sit back when they sit back. So I think it's that the resistance forces are doing an excellent job. What's interesting is that we've been told all throughout this so-called war on terror. Remember that the Muslims are crazy terrorists. They're inhuman madmen. They're unthinking. They just want to strap a bomb to themselves and kill lots of innocent people. However, if you look at this conflict, the Muslim community, the Muslim leaders, the Muslim world has been very controlled, has been responsible in how they react, has made every effort to lower the number of casualties, has been attacking military targets as opposed to civilian targets. And so what people are seeing is that the imperialists are the monsters. They're exposing themselves as the monsters. And the Muslim community and the Muslim world has exposed themselves as the civilized people who want peace.
Yeah, and I think one point that I try to make, and I'm curious your reaction to this, Margaret, is what Garland is saying. I think is 100% true, and it points to also the fact that, you know, Hezbollah, Iran, these forces, they have the ability to strike back very, very hard. They have the ability to make life maybe impossible for the Israeli settler regime. But at the same time, in doing so, and I think Hassan Nasrallah in his speech said that, you know, this was a blow to them, and this shows that they do have technological superiority in some respects. But in other respects, in terms of what Garland's talking about, this long kind of resistance war that is fought on their terms, it does also have this impact of keeping the situation, the escalation, as Garland was saying, stable and on their terms, but also avoids what I think would very well be the case if Hezbollah or Iran or all resistance were to step it up their resistance to a certain degree. There would be complete and total devastation and war. That's kind of what Israel is promising and wanting to drag the United States into doing. That seems to be the agenda. Margaret, your thoughts?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It's funny. I saw someone posting on X who said the same thing. We're always told that you know, the Arabs are crazy maniacs and the West is so civilized. It's just the opposite. They're shown so much restraint. Hezbollah, Iran, the wild card is Israel and its allies, the U.S. and the collective West, who to a nation defend Israel, who repress speech in their own countries, all these countries which claim to be democracies. Anybody who speaks up against Zionism is repressed. We even have thought crimes now. There are universities that say that the word Zionism is protected speech. And if you criticize Zionism, you can be penalized for hate speech. Students are told, well, even if you protest off campus, you could still be expelled or suspended. So this is what we see. We see one side, as Garland was pointing out, the one that is obeying international law, and the lawless nations being the ones that are in charge because of their interference on behalf of Israel. Excuse me, they're colluding with Israel, as I said, with the ICC and the ICJ, and Israel telling the U.S., help us to discredit the ICJ so they don't finally get around to calling us the genocidaires. So those are the things that I'm thinking about, but I'm also thinking about what we can do, how we can protest. There have been millions of people, I'm not exaggerating either, of people around the world protesting this barbarity. And we've been hit with the hammer. So how do we move forward, knowing that there's going to be repression of speech, that there's going to be repression of our actions? What is it that we have to really think about this very dangerous moment so that we can be possibly effective in bringing these crimes to an end?
You know,
well, oh, sorry, Garland, you go.
If I might add something else too, what we are told is that Netanyahu wants to expand. This is the story we get, that he wants to expand the war, but you know, the Biden administration, they're certainly reasonable people, and they're trying to fight Netanyahu and stop him from being such a madman, right? In reality, I think that the Biden administration would want a border war too, because the issues that the Biden administration, the imperialists have right now with Russia, with China, etc., are first and foremost economic, and they're scared to death of BRICS. And they see the Belt and Road Initiative running all through Africa and the Middle East, where there's all this precious oil. They see countries saying we want to be part of it. They see countries in the Middle East joining the powerful countries in the Middle East, not just joining the BRICS coalition, but becoming significant nodes in the not poles, but nodes, because a node kind of implies a network, right? An equal network. So you see Iran, Saudi Arabia, some of these other countries, Algeria, becoming very important. I think what the U.S. empire would like to do is get some kind of war going on in that region before the October BRICS meeting, because first and foremost, they want to disrupt BRICS. Don't underestimate how critical the BRICS and the Belt and Road issues are to the Biden administration, the City of London people, et cetera. They're scared to death of that, and they would be happy to have a war to try to disrupt it.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. And the United States, you heard John Kirby say that they don't want a war, supposedly, but yet, just similar to Ukraine, but of course different, because the relationship is indeed closer. I think we've seen that over the course of this genocide and this recent instance, this incredibly horrific war crime, terrorist attack in Lebanon, has exposed the fact that the United States attempts to distance itself from these acts, but all of the world knows that the United States is deeply involved with Israel, and that if Israel did this, there's absolutely no way that the United States at least knew about it, let alone perhaps participated and or encouraged this behavior. Any final words on this issue, Margaret?
Well, I think there's division in the U.S. state about how to proceed. We've seen in Ukraine, and there's a connection there. So we've seen in Ukraine this infighting about whether or not Ukraine can send missiles deep into Russia, with the stupid British choosing to involve themselves. Allegedly Blinken and Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken disagreeing and others agreeing. It seems like, though, the hardliners eventually win, but we see these tensions within the U.S. I'm sure there are people who, well, actually, they're, these think tanks and whatnot. You see these crazy people saying, we don't have to be afraid of a two-front war. Why do you need a war at all? Especially when they can't get anybody to join up. So I believe there are tensions in the State Department, in the Department of Defense, about these issues. So yes, there are some who want that, and there's some who don't. And then the other wild card is Grandpa still has the keys. We don't know what Biden would. We don't know if he's in his right mind. We don't know. I mean, he's always been someone who loved war. I mean, this bloodshed is all his fault. The first thing he did in last October was run to Israel and give Netanyahu a blank check. But I also think it's true. The BRICS meeting is coming up. We had a just completed summit in Beijing. Every African nation showed up. Everybody got FaceTime with Xi Jinping. And we have seen, and the BRICS are about to meet. The BRICS are expanding. Countries want to. There's like a waiting list to get into the BRICS. And everything the U.S. does, though, weakens itself. So Israel has destroyed the electronics industry in some countries. Everybody wants to buy directly from China and make sure that equipment comes directly from China. So it's the sort of thing where it's inevitable. The multipolar world is a fact. De-dollarization is ultimately going to be a fact. So yes, there are some who want it, but there are risks involved. And we will see who wins. But one thing is certain, the U.S. is going to undermine itself, even as it continues in following this imperialist policy.
Yeah. Well, if I can make one last statement, it's unfortunate, but here's a reality. This is a horrible, unthinkable genocide, and it tears at our heart to watch this, right? But to the imperialists, this is nothing. To them, they're looking at the Israelis saying, "Man, you guys are junior genociders. You really have no." I mean, look at what happened in Syria. Somewhere between 600,000 and 700,000 deaths as a result of Obama's dirty war. Look at what happened in Iraq. 1 million deaths. I mean, and you can just go on and you can go. There's a great book called The Jakarta Method. I don't know what to call it. Great. Look what they did in Indonesia. I mean, throughout Latin America, on and on and on. So if you look at what's probably now a couple 100,000 deaths, as horrible as that is, we're able to see it now. We're able to get information, same day information and details on it, and get pictures and video. And so we can be horrified by it. But the imperialists and the colonialists in the US and in Europe, they've been doing this stuff for centuries, and much worse than this. In fact, I would argue they're probably looking at us, so as we're upset over it, as we're disgusted and devastated by this, they're probably saying, guys, what? We don't even understand. This is a small genocide as compared to what we really do normally, but we can see it now. And so this makes it the horror of what they have been doing for centuries is being brought home to us by the ability of technology to get the information out in real time now.
Yeah. I mean, the implications of just this singular attack in Lebanon are so huge. The ways in which it will, I think, push forward this multipolar world, because we just witnessed thousands of people have their devices be turned into weapons against the civilian population, regardless of what you think. Hezbollah is not a civilian population. No. It was all within the civil society context. It was not on the battlefield. This was just happening in Lebanon. People were living their lives, and boom, suddenly they had their hands or their limbs or their faces or whatever blown away. So that being said, perhaps we could talk about the implications of what's happening in West Asia and Gaza and regionally on the world, and how it reflects. I think it reflects something very important. And Margaret, I want to bring you back in. The fact that the United States has been exposed as losing its legitimacy in this region. You have now, when people want to understand what's going on here and really want to see what's going on, they look toward the axis of resistance. They look toward these forces. Even people protesting in the West are talking about it. And the U.S. and Israel have lost so much legitimacy that it even looks like the U.S. doesn't have the capacity to even steer this ship anymore. I mean, your thoughts, Margaret?
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's this crazy relationship. It's like a bad marriage of, a dysfunctional family where Israel wouldn't exist without the U.S., but sometimes they go out on their own and dare the U.S. to say anything or do anything, or hope that the U.S. will intervene. So it's a strange relationship. But I also want to amplify what Garland was saying about the West. There would be no West without terrible crimes around the world. With European nations were made rich by the transatlantic slave trade and by exploiting nations around the world, stealing resources, brutally suppressing freedom, liberation movements. So I don't think we should talk about that without talking about the history of that region, which itself was colonized. These borders in Western Asia and the Middle East were created by European countries. So, but they've now been delegitimized, to your point. The U.S. has no legitimacy anywhere in the world outside of, they always say anybody they don't like is isolated. Putin is isolated, or anybody they don't like is isolated. It's the collective West that's isolated. Most people on Earth have If they didn't know already, they now know the true nature of the capitalist Western nations. And they have no legitimacy. That's why they have to keep lying. That's why they have to attack independent media. That's why this platforms are deplatforming, because they know they have lost legitimacy. Sadly, though, it's people in this country who are most indoctrinated and the least informed by design. But the West is finished in the eyes of the rest of the world. It can't be rescued. It can't change. They are done for in that regard.
You know, and let me add something from what Margaret was saying, and that is, you know, I think to some extent the ruling elite in the West aren't as concerned with other people knowing what they're going to do, because let's face it, they're just going to use brute force. You can know that I'm going to, you know, rob you of your money if I've got a gun pointed at your head and you can't stop me from robbing you. Well, then I don't care if you know it or not. Yeah, okay, I'm robbing you. Give me your money, right? The problem that the concern that the ruling elite always has is internal uprisings. And one of the things that's happening as a result of this conflict is that people internally inside the US empire, inside Europe, are questioning. People who had no idea what the word Zionism meant. And in the context of Judaism and Zionism and the differences and etc., are now learning these things. And they're seeing firsthand the brutality of their leaders. People that say, you know, you've seen the advertisement, the US Navy, a force for good. We're going around the world. We're standing up for democracy. We're stopping bad things. People inside, granted, there's still a lot of brainwashed zombies here, but more and more people are waking up. And one of the indications of that is the number of people that are going to alternative media, that are going to alternative platforms. Just the fact that the US empire is attacking alternative platforms and trying to shut them down shows you that they are horrified at what's happening. Their biggest fear is that the people inside the empire learn what they are and what they're doing. And now, due to, you know, shows like this, the work that Margaret's doing, the great work over at Black Agenda Report and Black Alliance for Peace, and on, their attack on the Uhuru movement. A lot of people had never even heard of the Uhuru movement. Now people have heard of it and find out what they're doing. So one of the things that they're doing in their ineptitude and in their fear and in their lashing out at everybody is that they're teaching people inside the empire that, as I always say, people who think that they're on a luxury liner are now finding out that they're on a pirate ship.
Yeah. And, you know, I think the longer that something like a literal genocide that Israel is committing with the US's help, the more and more that people are seeking answers. They want to know, why is it that Israel just literally blinded the Iranian envoy to Lebanon in this horrific terrorist attack? Why is it that Israel's always talking about going to war in Lebanon, going to war against Hezbollah? Why is it that Israel continues to want to eradicate the Palestinian resistance? People want to know these things, and I think that's why we see those who are trying to provide that information at all various levels are facing increase in intent and more intense censorship. I think that we are seeing that. So before we started here today, Facebook was just removing all of my live stream share posts. They're just removing them. It's like they won't tell you why. They even craft their removal messages in a way that makes it incredibly difficult to screen share them, to screenshot them and show what's going on. They intentionally cut off posts and make it so it's increasingly difficult to show that. So we are in a moment where I think that shows a level of desperation, because I think what is the truth here is that the United States and Israel in the region and also worldwide, they've truly lost an incredible amount, not just of legitimacy, but they're also losing just in general. They're not getting their way. You can kill a bunch of Palestinians, you can kill a bunch of Lebanese, but does that really lead to the ultimate outcome of maintaining dominance? It seems like the opposite is occurring. Margaret, your thoughts?
Well, it's strange because they can, I hate to say this, they can do this for a long time. But Israel is showing signs of strain. Its economy, people want to leave, but you can't now because airlines don't want to go there. They can only maintain what they're doing with more and more brute force. Unfortunately, they have the power to use that brute force. Israel has the bully on the block defending them. So I unfortunately, this can go on. What will be the breaking point? It's hard to say. We have seen Iran not retaliate yet, but we see Russia helping Iran and providing defense for that country to make it harder for Israel or the U.S. should they want to attack Iran. They can't. So we don't know what other countries will do in their efforts to be the peacemakers. It's funny. China and Russia are always portrayed as these crazy countries. They used to try to get along with the U.S. They did some things they should not have done, like not in 2011 at the UN, they should have vetoed, one or both countries could have vetoed the no-fly zone resolution that might have saved Libya, but they were trying to go along to get along. I mean, they found out that they can't placate the bully, but these are countries with, they may not always do the right thing, but they have the sensible, sane leadership. So unfortunately, it can go on. It's hard to predict because we don't know what that event will be. We don't know what they're talking about in Moscow or Beijing or Tehran. So it is hard to say. So it pains me to say that it can go on at this level, but it can go on at this level. In the absence of an honest broker, the U.S. being a dishonest broker. So the U.S. is losing, but it's incremental and it's slow. It's too slow to stop the bloodletting.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's having consequences too. You will both have mentioned the censorship. We can just talk about all the different cases. You have Richard Medhurst, you have Scott Ritter having his home raided by the FBI. You have the Uhuru 3 convicted, while a victory to not be convicted on the FARA charge, Foreign Agent Registration Act charge. They have been convicted of conspiracy, which we will see what happens for them. But we have on and on and on, case after case after case. Dan Kovalik, friend of all of us and friend of the show, stopped at the airport. Danny Shaw. We go on and on and on. I mean, this is a pattern. It all has to do, too, with this conflict. You said, Margaret, it's a slow kind of bloodletting. The bloodshed continues, but the overall trajectory is ultimately unfavorable. And I think that's why we see a lot of this attempts to silence those who are, shining a light on not just the atrocities, but the true nature of what's going on here. Garland, I want to bring you in.
Well, and I think if we're fortunate enough to make it to the election, I that's going to be interesting because as I think we would all agree, it is very important for third parties to grow, for other options to grow in order for us to have any chance at pushing back against the ruling elite. And the Democrats very foolishly put Jill Stein and Butch Ware, her vice president, on a show called The Breakfast Club, and they just like mercilessly attacked them the whole time and exposed themselves. And it looked really ugly. It looked really condescending and unreasonable and unfair. And I think that exposed a lot of people out here to the anti-war and anti-genocide policies of Jill Stein and VP Hopeful Ware. And I think that was good. Hopefully we'll see. I'd like to see a lot of people vote third party, whatever third party it is, get away from these two parties. And maybe, while we can't wake these people up, No, you can't. People who think, well, if you do this or that, you'll somehow influence the Democratic Party or Republican Party to do something different or to take different policies. I don't see that happening ever. That's not who they are. You're not going to get a bird to swim or a fish to fly, metaphorically. But I do think that we can start to make some. Look, if you look historically, no empire falls overnight. In a historical context, what's happening now is happening at light speed. When you look at like the Roman Empire being over 1,000 years, and then some of these empires took 100 years or 50 years or 200 years to fall apart, whereas the U.S. empire was at its peak for like 30 years, and it's falling rapidly over a course of a few years. So I think while it seems slow to us, in the context of history, what's happening now is happening at light speed. If you look at what's happening in Africa, they have been pillaging Africa for centuries. And now over the course of a couple of years, we see the good things happening in Africa. So as painful as it is to endure the horrific genocide that's happening to the Palestinian people, we can continue to support it. To support these people in any and every way we can, and continue to push back against the empire. And but I think we have to, from the perspective of analysts too, I think we have to evaluate this from an analytical and historical context also. And maybe that's the only thing that can keep us sane, because as we look at the horrific things happening to these people, it just burns at our very hearts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, from how I see it, whether it's Palestine or the entire region in this, Margaret, you mentioned earlier, a colonial situation, anti-colonial resistance movement, it's quite clear to me that the trajectory is that they're going to win, because all of the conditions are there. But similar to what the situation that was true with Vietnam, Korea, and so many other instances, the violence is going to last. The war is going to last for quite a long time. And
the Algerians lost what, 6, 7, 8 million people? You know what I mean? I mean, you look at some of these anti-colonial wars that the French, on and on, and you see literally millions of people died to get out from under imperialism. And sadly, this is a horrific history that we've seen in the global South in order for people to get out from under imperialism.
Yeah, and the one difference here, though, is that you have several states, but really the big state, Iran, with huge military capabilities, with perhaps unprecedented in the history of these anti-colonial resistance movements that you mentioned, Garland, has the ability to create, and the United States and Israel with them, just an absolutely catastrophic situation, which is why I think we're seeing how slowly Iran and the rest of the resistance are taking this, is because, yeah, you can unleash those forces, but then what happens afterward? Well, the United States and Israel do what they do. They use their so-called air superiority to lay waste, and then you might have nuclear war anyway, because Israel is a nuclear power. I was just reading, and maybe final comment, Margaret, I was just reading an article in Jerusalem Post. In order to deter Iran, you have to be less nuclear ambiguous. You need to talk about how you have these weapons because you might use them, which is ironic, because we always hear how awful Russia is for talking about nuclear deterrence when they're the ones who are being encroached upon. But here you have a settler colonial entity talking about using nuclear weapons offensively in order to ensure that the most powerful actor in the resistance is subdued. Margaret, final comment.
Yeah, it's, it has been said that perhaps that's something Russia will assist Iran with. And the irony of this, Obama's Iran nuclear deal was scuttled by Donald Trump. And the Iranians promised in exchange for the end of sanctions to stop their nuclear enrichment program. Trump ended it, and Biden followed Trump. And it's so funny. We're always told Trump is a fascist, Trump is horrible. Biden, how often does he follow Trump in foreign policy? His foreign policy was Trump's. So, should Iran develop a nuclear weapon, it will be because of the United States, which scuttled this plan, which helped them do what they wanted to do. But there are forces in the U.S., and I don't want to give the impression that everything is, Israel. They're in sync with a lot of folks in Washington. So but this, Israel having a nuclear arsenal at all, that is not part of any treaty, that hasn't been inspected. The man who revealed it, they put him in jail for years, and now he's under house arrest the rest of his life. They won't even let him leave Israel. This is, although you're not supposed to say Israel has nukes, it's like it's an open secret. But I don't know what you'd have to do to the New York Times or Washington Post to get them to say it, or any of the TV networks or a presidential candidate. This is it's madness. It's absolute madness that Israel is so open about the violence it's willing to unleash in order to keep getting its way, at the expense of millions of lives. And I've said this before, and I want to say this again. The dead in Gaza and now in Lebanon, they're not collateral damage. That's the plan. Ethnic cleansing is the plan. Killing people is the plan. That's why they're waging this war. And I want to say something else to those who, or if you hear people trying to defend Israel blowing up doctors and nurses and little children, that's a war crime. By definition, collective punishment is a war crime. Fourth Geneva Convention's Article 33, I even memorized it. Punishing someone for a crime they did not commit is by definition a war crime.
Along with indiscriminate attacks, too. Attacks must be aimed at military targets. These were indiscriminate attacks, so that is also a war crime and a crime against humanity. I'll say this about the nuke business, and that is, I've talked to experts who believe that Iran they have the technology, within probably days, if not a week, they could have nuclear warheads, and they already have the delivery systems. Iran doesn't do it because they don't want to do it. But I think it gets back to this. The resistance forces understand that they have to control the escalation. That as long as they control the escalation, they control the conflict. And that once Israel's crazy, they're wild. They just want things to get out of hand and to go crazy, so they can just throw all weapons in all directions. And as long as the resistance forces control the escalation, control the style of fighting, the type of fighting, etc., then they're in charge. And I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to show restraint in a way that allows them to control the conflict.
Yes, indeed. So now I would like to talk about Ukraine, but also in the context of this theme, I think, of that we've brought up of the censorship, because recently, all month, we've had Zelensky, Ukraine, begging for permission to strike Russia with long-range missiles, and for the United States to both provide the capabilities as well as the permission to do so. And then you had Vladimir Putin say that, well, if you do that, this is a direct conflict with NATO, and we will do anything, including perhaps the nuclear option, to prevent the existential demise of Russia. And then you had Joe Biden back off, and actually that has maintained over the course of the last several days and weeks. Now, I wanted to play a video because as the situation in Ukraine seems to deteriorate, there's also this blowback, this war kind of at home that I wanted to talk about as well. And here's what Hillary Clinton had to say on Rachel Maddow about those who are so-called spreading propaganda and what should happen to them.
Just as Mueller indicted a lot of Russians who were engaged in direct election interference and boosting Trump back in 2016. But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda. And whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrence, because just
So essentially, she's saying the deterrence is imprisoning essentially people like us for pointing out this dynamic I want you to talk about, Margaret, which is you have the dangerous escalations as well as perhaps the huge setbacks for the United States and NATO and Ukraine. And on the other hand, you have an attempt to ensure that no one is talking about it. So, Margaret, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's like, so what is propaganda? I mean, if you state a fact that Ukraine is losing, is that a Putin talking point? I mean, they will say that it is. It took the New York Times 2 years. I was actually shocked they did it at all. They finally this year reported on what happened 2 years ago, that Russia was engaged in efforts to end the war shortly after they began what they call the special military operation. It was a story that was disappeared, and the US and the UK scuttled these talks. Lives could have been saved. Thousands of lives could have been saved, but the US didn't want to do it. If you point that out, is that being a propagandist? If you question the US or oppose the US or offer a different narrative, what is it exactly that she thinks should be criminally, there should be criminal charges for? We're already seeing, we've touched on the deplatforming. We've had that happen to us on Facebook, where we'll post articles and they disappear. And they'll say, you're violating community standards and you're spreading spam. You're sharing an article. Or they'll say, looks like you're trying to influence people. Well, that's why you write, to influence people. So, we've seen the Secretary of State name names, RT. Now you can't get RT. I don't know where you can get RT now. They took it off of Facebook. This great site, African Stream, they attacked them as being Kremlin propagandists. One of the best, if not the best, sites for news on Africa. So, but the censorship is part of the repression, because they cannot maintain their effort at dominance if even a few people, and that's their fear. If even RT America didn't have a big audience, but they didn't care. Did Press TV have a big audience? No, they took them off of platforms as well, seized their website, in fact. So, but they're terrified of even a small group of people having a voice. Nobody's, forced to watch these. And what about freedom of speech? If you deprive me of the ability to see African Stream or to watch RT, don't I have a right to see that? It sounds to me like what I was told growing up only happened in the Soviet Union. That's what we have now in this ongoing and sustained repression that's defended by the likes of Hillary Clinton, who, despite her colossal screw up in 2016, is still able to get on TV networks and be interviewed. The biggest loser ever, most inept politician ever. But this is the kind of person who will always be alive. And she even lied about the Mueller investigation. Nobody was indicted for collusion. The story we were told for months and years. There was tax convictions. There were process crimes. But the big thing they told us that was happening never actually happened. And yet it's what millions of people believed. And that is why this war propaganda goes on. It is valuable to them.
And I'll add that just on the whole Russiagate part, when she said they indicted some Russians, what she left out was that Mueller indicted a Russian company. The Russian company then sent their lawyers to the U.S. and says, "Okay, we want to have a trial," and Mueller had to drop the charges because he didn't have anything. So yeah, he indicted some Russians, but it was all a fraud, and he ended up, the U.S. government dropped the charges, and they said, "Well, we got to drop the charges because we'd have to reveal national security secrets if we pursued this." Well, if that was the case, then why'd you charge him in the first place? You knew what evidence you did or didn't have. So again, Hillary's trying to go back to something that never existed in the first place. But again, I'll say this. Paradoxically, what's happening now in a way reveals something good. Here's what I mean. They are desperate because they're losing. They are desperate because people are waking up. They're desperate because people are learning. And it's like whack-a-mole. Every time they shut something down here, people just go somewhere else and watch it. Well, you can't watch whatever. So, well, okay, well, I'll watch Danny Dhaiphong or Margaret Kimberley or Garland Nixon or whatever. Every time they shut down, you have new, whether it's Rumble or Rockfin or Odyssey, you have new online platforms popping up, etc. I predict there will be more online platforms and social media platforms will be popping up from the global South. And there'll be more opportunities for people to have unfettered access to information. That's going to continue to grow, I think. But the point I'm making, I guess, is this. The main point I'm making is this. Don't view, as horrible as it is, their attempts at censorship as a victory for them. It shows that they're losing, and everything that they do now shows desperation, like a drowning man who's just reaching over in all directions. We've got to charge somebody. We've got to shut this down. We've got to stop this. Anything they can do, and nothing's working. Because the truth it just continues to leak out. And look at the numbers for CNN. Look at the numbers for MSNBC. They're going down. And all the views for alternative media are going through the roof.
Yeah, and perhaps, Margaret, we can get to a bit of this truth here with regard to, Ukraine. There's so much enthusiasm about Kursk, so much enthusiasm about continuing to support Ukraine for the long haul. Biden is going to meet Zelensky on his way out of office to solidify that commitment. But on the other side, you have this intense repression, which, as Garland said, is indicative of huge losses that are now that we are paying for, as well as Ukrainians. Ukrainians are paying the ultimate price, Russians as well. But at the same time, this conflict has not gone the way that the United States and NATO has hoped it would go.
They did not turn the ruble to rubble, did they? So 2 years later, after the Biden administration instigated this conflict, almost 2 years after they blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, and that's the only thing they succeeded in doing, was cutting off Western Europe from Russia and impoverishing Europe in the process and forcing them to buy fracked gas from the US. That's the only thing they succeeded in doing. Now they have a problem. Election day is less than 8 weeks away, and there will not be a Ukrainian victory by January. It isn't going to happen. They're out of men. They are outgunned. The US can help them, some cockamamie plan to go into Kursk, the site of one of the biggest tank battles in World War II. Did they really think Russians would not respond to an attack on Kursk, of all places? But so they're literally dragging Ukrainians off the street, forcing them into the army to be trained badly for a couple of weeks, then sending them off to get killed, trying to force Ukrainians to go back and join the army, all at the behest of the US, including Donald Trump, who has gone along with this project bipartisan. And after all his talk and Republicans talk, the last big tranche of money happened because Trump made it happen. He told the Republicans, this is what we're going to do. So this is a huge failure for the United States, which did not get what it thought it was going to get, what it didn't get what the rest of the world was told. It's another cause of the loss of legitimacy for this country. But you see no change at the top. No one, none of the duopoly candidates talking about changing anything about Ukraine. You have Vladimir Putin talking about red lines, and they keep saying, oh, he's bluffing. Well, he's bluffing until the day he doesn't bluff. And we've had 20 years of the U.S. unilaterally withdrawing from these nuclear treaties. We've got nukes pointed at each other and no treaties, nothing to control a situation that could get out of hand in a couple of hours and end life as we know it on this planet.
You know, I'll say this, because the thing they forget is this. Russia's a country with a significant input in the world market for a number of natural resources, right? So they say, okay, we're going to strike Russia with deep strikes. Russia could certainly react violently and brutally against Europe, and that could end up in a nuclear exchange. However, put me in charge of that country with all those natural resources for a second. And you know what I would do 1 month before the election? I'd say, you know, here's what we're going to do. We're going to continue pumping oil to China and Iran and our immediate allies. Other than that, we're taking our oil off the market for 30 days. And you see how it feels. Europe, you guys, you know what? You want to cut yourself off. Russia is still a significant supplier of oil and gas to Europe. I'd say that, look, we don't have any problem finding a market. Everybody wants our oil and gas. You know what? You get no more. The price of oil, the price of gas would go through the roof. And I would say to Europe, and this is not like a temporary punishment. You find your way through the winter however you can. And the winter after that, I'm not doing business with you anymore. I've got plenty of other places that I can sell my gas and oil products. US, same with you. And guess what would happen? The price of gasoline would be $14 a gallon. And the Biden administration would say, uh-oh, because they know what the electoral results of that would be in the United States. So the Russians still have some cards they can play with natural resources, without even going to the kinetic reaction. And they forget about that, you know?
Yeah, indeed. With each passing day and week, it looks that Russia is the one with the leverage. It's not a talking point. We hear this even in Western mainstream media. We hear this from U.S. officials when they talk about, well, maybe we shouldn't do long-range strikes. They're not just saying that because they truly believe that, you know, it's not going to work out. They're also understanding what the huge consequences are, I think, of this conflict, and they're trying to maintain it at a level where it will last forever. But at the same time, they understand that there are huge risks involved. But at the same time, we still get lie after lie after lie. And, you know, you have Donald Trump on the one hand, parroting ridiculous conspiracies about, Haitian immigrants eating dogs and cats. But at the same time, you have Kamala Harris even being fact-checked. And I want your reaction to this segment that was done on ABC, where Kamala Harris was fact-checked through Governor Healy of Massachusetts, and just take a listen to this.
About her comments about the military. She said during the debate this about the U.S. military. Let's listen.
As of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century.
Our fact checkers found that to be false, and I have a lot of experience in that area as well. There are currently 900 U.S. military personnel in Syria, 2,500 U.S. troops in Iraq. All have been under regular threat from drones and missiles for months. We also have action in the Red Sea. We also, every single day, the Navy SEALs, Delta Forces, special operators can be part of any sort of deadly raid. So why would she make that claim?
Well, I think what's important here, Martha, is that Kamala Harris, in contrast to Donald Trump, demonstrated herself to be commander-in-chief. We are in a world where there are all sorts of conflicts, and it's all the more reason we need somebody who's serious and who supports the military. And just remember,
But Governor, excuse me, but she said there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone. That is not true. You say she demonstrated her ability to be commander in chief, but did she not know about these people in Syria and Iraq? Why would she say that?
Look, that was a comment. That was a comment in a debate. I think.
So I just wanted to end there because that's a great ending. That's a comment in a debate, meaning lying is okay because it was a debate. I mean, this is where we're at. And then, you have
for Kamala, it's okay. Lying's okay exactly. For Kamala. That's what she said. Donald Trump's a liar. He lies in debate. Well, Kamala lied. But that was in a debate. Come on.
Then you have RFK Jr. and Donald Trump Jr. I mean, RFK Jr. I lost a lot of respect for because of the Israel's talk. And of course, Donald Trump Jr. never had really any respect for him. But they penned an op-ed where they talk about nuclear escalation. And no one in the U.S. political class is talking about that seriously. They're talking about what RFK Jr. Wrote in that article, which is they're just poking the bear constantly, seeing that the bear is not responding hostilely or is not doing everything it can. It's not launching nuclear weapons. And they're saying, oh, we can keep doing it. So, Margaret, do you want to jump in?
Well, that was really hilarious. I had not seen that before, Danny. That was a lot of fun to watch. Someone be called to account for a whopping lie that Kamala Harris told during the debate. People have forgotten U.S. troops have been in Iraq now for more than 20 years. Syria. Nobody even told us there were going to be troops in Syria, and yet there they are. And they have been engaged in combat, and the U.S. is trying to strangle Syria with sanctions. So it was very important. It was rare for her to be called out that way. But but she told the lie because in general, she gets away with it. And, just to say, well, it was like, I think that's what Garland was referring to when Kamala Harris was asked about running first against Biden and then becoming his running mate in her attack. She said, it's just a debate, ha, ha, her crazy laugh. But it shows you the degree of deception and corruption in this country. We're told Donald Trump is the liar. Donald Trump is the fascist. We have fascism now. And we're going to get Trump and Harris present some of the same dangers, but different dangers. But I don't feel like there's, what was the expression, harm reduction from Kamala Harris being president instead of Donald Trump. So that was a rare moment of truth, but unfortunately, it is rare. And this poking of the bear, you're absolutely right. One day the poking gets some kind of response. And I'm sure Garland's idea has been thought of in Moscow. I don't want and that's another problem though. Any action, any reaction justifiable is going to harm people here in some way. But that's something that our state has brought upon us.
Yeah. I had a comment I was going to make, but I forgot it. So usually when I forget my comments, they come back to me in a minute. So, I know this was important. You know what? Let me say this too. For all of the discussions we get about Donald Trump with the eating animals, right? That's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I know Margaret will remember this because we discussed it on my radio show. A while back, the people in the Biden administration, I think the Washington Post had articles, they were claiming that the Haitians were involved in cannibalism. They were lying. They were saying Jimmy Barbecue Cherizet, he got that name because he was barbecuing people, when the fact is he got the name because his mother sold barbecue. So now yes, Donald Trump said that it's, I guess, supposed to be some kind of a joke or whatever. They're talking about whether or not it's true, etc. And it sounds pretty absurd. But let's not forget that the liberals attacked a horrifically racist attack, an old school Tarzan movie 1950 style racist attack. And that came from the Biden administration, claiming that the Haitians were committing cannibalism. And eventually, the fact checkers finally came out and said, well, there's no evidence that they're committing cannibalism. But they were demonizing the Haitians in Haiti so that they could go over there. And right now they're trying to reoccupy Haiti with the United Nations again.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Garland, I know you had some time limitations. I was going
got
to
a few more minutes.
Another 20 minutes or so and then head out. I wanted to talk about one more topic, broad topic. We have the BRICS summit coming up in October, late October. You have 30 plus countries wanting to join BRICS alongside Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and of course the 4 other countries: UAE, Saudi Arabia, Iran. I think Egypt, if I'm correct. However, you also have a dynamic where we have the United States empire is truly falling apart, and the legitimacy of the empire is completely just shot in crumbling. And I just want to show this clip, just even of this election coming up. You have 2 candidates that are not offering any kind of solutions to the problems facing the planet. You have Donald Trump promising tariffs on de-dollarization. You also have Kamala Harris promising a more hawkish foreign policy than Donald Trump, especially with regard to Ukraine. But here's Nancy Pelosi just talking about the process. So while you have BRICS countries lining up for a consensus-based institution, multilateral institution like BRICS, here you have Nancy Pelosi, supposedly retired, commenting on how Kamala Harris ended up becoming the candidate in the first place for the Democratic Party.
You had reportedly said you wanted a sort of an open primary if Joe Biden stepped down. Did you change your mind because you saw all the excitement around Kamala Harris?
No, I didn't change my mind. We had an open primary and she won it. Nobody else got in the race because she was politically astute and
yeah, according to Nancy Pelosi, there was an open primary in the Democratic Party that nobody was aware of. But this is the thing, is now we have a world where you have China, you have Russia, you have a smaller part of Iran, you have the rest. Oh, I forgot to say Iran as the other BRICS member. You have this multipolar world emerging and strengthening, and then you have the unipolar world led by the United States looking like this. Margaret, your assessment?
Well, that's just too hilarious. Nancy Pelosi is one of the people who led the charge to get rid of Joe Biden, lest we forget. As my favorite line from the debate was Trump pointing out that you threw Biden out like a dog, which was absolutely true. And Nancy Pelosi was one of the people in charge, one of those rich donors who wanted him gone. I believe the entire effort was to get her in the first place, that they knew Biden wasn't up to it any longer. But the person who actually had a primary, who actually went through a democratic process, was Donald Trump. Republicans went to the polls in many states and they made him the winner. So he's the one who really had an open primary. And for them to say after the primary season was over, well, we pressured Biden out and he endorsed her, and that's the equivalent of an open primary, is just a lie. I think the Democratic Party is never going to have a primary again. They're going to try to find some way to get the oligarchs to pick whoever their consensus candidate is. And I don't believe we'll see a primary anymore from that party.
Danny, let's not forget, you had a number of states that when RFK Jr. was running, Marianne Williams was running, Dean Smith was running, and I know Massachusetts, I know Florida, North Carolina, at least Tennessee, I know those states for sure, The only name they put on the ballot was Joe Biden. They had like 4 other people running or 3 other people running, and they said, we're not even going to put their name on the ballot. We'll just put Joe Biden's name on the ballot. So, and they said, like, we're not going to count the delegates from, I think, New Hampshire. And if you go to New Hampshire and you, have any rallies or you campaign, then you won't get any, we won't count any of your delegates. So the fact of the matter is this, they didn't even have a primary. It was a complete and total setup. It was a fraud, their primary, even when Joe Biden was in. And then eventually they said, nah, we're just going to throw Kamala in. And the bottom line is this, the Democratic Party is not a political party anymore. It is an elitist club, and they can't ever have a primary again. Because if they have a primary, it's pretty clear the people will pick somebody rather than these ratty old elitists that just lie. I mean, they asked her a question. Did you have what about this? She said, we did have an open primary, knowing that they didn't have an open primary. These are the people who tell us that they just laugh at Donald Trump. Oh, he's a liar. He lies. Every word that comes out of his mouth is a lie. And Donald Trump does not lie any more than them. So this is the way they have to do things. When you see a party where 80% of the people want a national health care service, 88, I think, and 12%, the 12% that run the party said no. When over 80% of the people want to stop the genocide in Gaza and the people say no, you cannot have an election in a party where the rulers of the party are so divorced, not only just divorced from their constituents, but their policies are antithetical to the things that their constituents want. You can never have any election, and you can't have any hint of democracy. I do think what they've got now is they're trying to play the people, their last Donald Trump's over there, he's scary, and Kamala Harris is some way, I guess, basically using the old slavery 1-drop rule. They finally decided that she's black now that it's convenient for them. And I think they're hoping that'll get them over. I just have a feeling they won't. And I'll say this, it may be controversial, but I don't give a crap. Based on the RFK Jr. Donald Trump letter that I saw, based on the things that I've seen, when it comes to an existential threat to humanity, I would argue that Donald Trump is probably the lesser evil of them right now. And I know that's controversial, but I don't give a crap. I would argue he is the lesser evil, that even though maybe we're 99% chance that we're going to get nuked with Biden and maybe a 90% chance with Trump, that's still 8 points less.
Yeah, I mean, we are in this very, I think, just critical and perhaps unprecedented moment that has been building up, I think, over the past, especially the last 8 years, is we are in a position where, I mean, the only topic where any of the candidates in that debate made any sense was the Ukraine topic, and it was Donald Trump who articulated, at the very least, some of the things he said, a little bit anti-Russia, a little bit of hubris, but the position was no nuclear war, end the conflict. That was the only thing said in that entire debate that either made sense or wasn't hawkish. That was it. And that is, I think, the situation we're in. Is I think that you're stating it pretty clearly, Garland, that if that is the reality, then you're indeed right. There is only that's the lesser evil, right? Because there is so much, even just at the rhetorical, political level, ideological level, there is so much unity on everything else. And I think that's why we see worldwide this movement toward BRICS and the growth of BRICS and multipolarity, is because the world is just pretty sick of this disaster. They're sick of this constant threat of war, and now constant threat of nuclear war. Margaret, jump in.
Oh, absolutely. It's while it's something that's not being discussed as widely as it should be, but there are enough people who know about it. It's really quite terrifying. Although you have to be careful with Trump, because what did he do? He's already been president, so we've seen what he's done, despite all the charges of Russian collusion and so forth. He did what other presidents did. He talked a good game during his campaign about having a different foreign policy, but he didn't really. So despite him saying, typical Trump, and one day I'll make some phone calls, the war will be over. No, it won't be. The same people that Garland referred to who run Congress is a big money laundering operation. And the last thing they want is for any of that military industrial complex money to stop flowing. And the corporate money that's flowed into Ukraine. That should be a scandal in and of itself. But so I'm not confident that Trump would actually do anything different. As I pointed out, he's the person who orchestrated this most recent allocation of money to Ukraine. But I'm also afraid of Biden. As I said, he still has the keys. It's 4 more months. We don't know what he could do. And we have no confidence in him. Is he running things? Is somebody else running things? What's his state of mind? If you catch him before 4 o'clock, he can still be alert. We don't know. We just know that we're in a dangerous situation with people who are incompetent. I can't recall a presidential a foreign policy team that has screwed up as much as Blinken and Sullivan and, well, she's gone, Newland, and the rest of them with the terrible decisions they have made, which aren't just in opposition to my politics, but have messed up the things they claim to want for the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, and I see people in the chat, you're like, oh, Trump is terrible, he's this. I'm not disagreeing with you. You know what I mean? I wouldn't call it the lesser of two evils. I'd call it the evil of two lessers. So I'm not here like I'm some Trump supporter. No, I mean, I'm far to the left. I'm probably right in the ghost of Hugo Chavez myself. But my point being, right now, I mean, think about where we are. Dick Cheney, John Bolton, and a bunch of people literally wrote a letter. Hey, Kamala Harris is our girl. Dick Cheney. Something just came out again. 200 Republicans, I already knew it was neocons, all say Kamala Harris is our girl. And she's literally going on TV. Hey, everybody, the Republicans love me. The horrific neocons, the really bad ones that want nuclear war, they like me. They hate Donald Trump. And like that's I'm supposed to say, oh, well, hey, Dick Cheney likes you. I'm in. How could I have been so foolish as not to understand that you were the candidate of my dreams? It is preposterous that we're in this position. And for me to say that Trump is the evil of two lessers is not to say that he's not evil. It is truly a condemnation because I see the system as of imperialism. To me, I always say this: Donald Trump didn't come into American politics. He came out of American politics. He is a monster that was produced by the dynamics of imperialism. And we're in a situation that's so bad now that people in this country can look at Donald Trump and think that he can get us out of it, which he can't get us out of imperialism. But to some point, I think there are people now that are just concerned with survival of humankind, and maybe we can work things out if we're still alive.
Yeah, and
that's not an unreasonable position, to be quite frank.
No, and I think that there is this just really stark reality in the U.S. when you watch maybe what will be the only debate we have amongst the duopoly, although I tend to doubt it. I think there might be one more, but even just in the singular moments where you have Kamala Harris and Donald Trump together, the biggest theme was trying to out-hawk each other, and Kamala Harris coming out as the bigger hawk. And that, as you said, Garland, is indicative of the evil of two lessers. And that's been a dynamic for the Democratic Party vis-a-vis the Republican Party for quite some time now, where they are out-hawking the Republicans, at least rhetorically. But if you look at the policies, very much the case. And, there's a theme of this. There is a war on this multipolarity on BRICS. This summit is going to happen. And in my estimation, I think that the United States, the unipolarists, the hawks, the neocon, I think they would be fine with China and Russia developing on their own slowly as long as they're isolated from the world. But now we're seeing that not only is their development accelerating, but there is no isolation. You have dozens upon dozens upon dozens of countries who want to join them. You have African countries rejecting the United States, rejecting Ukraine very openly. For example, like the countries in West Africa, like Burkina Faso, saying that Ukraine is a regime that cannot be trusted, given that it's been found training terrorists in the Sahel. Like this is the dynamic we are seeing, Margaret. And I'm curious on your thoughts and assessment as we move into this BRICS summit on where the world is going from here, given that you have on the one side this crumbling empire that has these two evil of two Lesters looking to run the world, and on the other side a multitude, the global majority, looking to perhaps rule themselves and leave this dynamic.
Well, I think going back to Israel, I think we're going to see some other act of terrorism between now and the BRICS, maybe during the BRICS. They want to disrupt. The last thing they want is for the world nations to be sovereign, to be free, to make alliances, to have the friends that they want. That is their nightmare. They want full spectrum dominance. They want to control everything. So this is a good development for humanity, but that's why they're against it. And so I am concerned that there will be some kind of event to try to ruin this summit that's going to take place in October. It's also closer to Election Day. So it's a time of trepidation. It's a time we should be hopeful about, that so many nations are going their own way, are looking at the U.S. and the collective West and saying, nope, we don't want any part of you. But that same collective West will do all it can to disrupt any efforts of other nations to really be sovereign and independent as they ought to be.
In the last 4 minutes, Garland, any predictions on this BRICS summit coming up?
Let's see. There'll be at least 1.5 more attempts on Donald Trump's life before that. I'm just going to go. The over and under is 1.5 attempts on his life. Probably in some other guys whose name will be Patsy. Patsy.
I mean, it's getting absurd. I mean, we didn't even touch on it for the fear of just completely being taken off stream, but it's getting absurd. Continue.
But but I really mean that. I'm going to over 1.5. But at any rate, no, I think that again, in the same way that the resistance forces in West Asia and the Middle East understand that they need to control the escalation, and they understand that a big part of what the U.S. empire wants to do is to disrupt BRICS, to disrupt the Belt and Road Initiative. I think the Russians and the Chinese understand, whether it's in Taiwan or Ukraine or firing long-range missiles within days of the BRICS summit. As Margaret said, right around the BRICS summit, they'll probably try to do something to bait or to goad the Russians and or the Chinese into doing something. Some way they're going to try to disrupt it, because in reality, this is about neoliberal economics, neoliberal capitalism. The real deal here is it's crashing, is that it is not sustainable, is that they're living off of debt, they're living off of magical asset-backed securities and derivatives and things of that nature, that these magical things that were created, financial tools that were created on Wall Street, and that the time's running out on that, and they know it. And so all of the anger at China, it's all about the fact that neoliberal capitalism is in its highest stage, was this imperialism, and it's crashing. And they know that the people, at some point, they say, oh, we're afraid that, I've even heard this, well, are you going to get World War III from Kamala Harris or Civil War with with Donald Trump. What they're afraid of is the French Revolution. They're afraid of a civil war, not where Americans are running at each other with a blue and gray uniform on. They're afraid of that when the American people say, due to economics, some cuts may be necessary. Those cuts will be on the business end of a guillotine.
Yes, indeed. And I'm just going through the super chats now as we close here. I want to also give a few announcements and leave it for you guys also to give a few announcements before we head out of here. It's been a great show. But I know, Margaret, we have an event coming. I think you're going to attend this event, correct? And speak at this event, the China 75,
Yep.
the 75th anniversary. I can pull up the details, but I don't know if you want to talk about that. That's going to happen, I believe, Sunday, September 29th.
Yes. October 1st, 75 years ago, Chairman Mao said, "Not today, colonizer." So it's the 75th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. It's a significant event that Americans should know much more about. Friends of Socialist China, International Action Center. I'll be there from Black Agenda Report. I believe AAPRP and other folks. It's a day-long event at the Malcolm and Betty Shabazz Center in New York City. So I've posted about it. I know you have. If folks go to Friends of Socialist China on social media, go to me on Twitter, or Facebook, well, who knows? It may not be there. Then a good list of knowledgeable people who are going to be talking about different aspects of China's history, the last 75 years of what is called New China. And don't forget to watch Black Agenda Report every week. Tomorrow, Fridays, Wednesdays, blackagendareport.com, all our articles. Friday, Black Agenda Radio. This week, we have an interview with Butch Ware, the Green Party vice presidential candidate, and an independent journalist, Musa Springer, talking about this weird story about Venezuelan gangs in Aurora, Colorado, something that was cooked up by a slumlord to try to get his cases out of court. So that's Friday on Black Agenda Radio.
That is truly the nexus of how geopolitics hits home, indeed. One thing before, Garland, your final words, announcements, things. For that event on September 29th, Sunday, it's both in person in New York City at the Malcolm X Betty Shabazz Center in Harlem, New York City. Margaret and I will be there in attendance in person. You can go to the video description and find the link to register in person, as well as if you cannot meet and do it in person, you can watch online. You can find all that registration information in the video description. Garland, anything you want to share before we head out of here?
Sure. I'm on Telegram at GarlandN, my first name and the first letter of my last name. My email is same thing, garlandn@gmail.com. I do answer emails. I love getting emails from people. Also, you can follow me on Facebook as long as I'm there. And Garland Nixon and Garland.Nixon on Instagram. That's where everybody can find me. And don't forget my YouTube. I'm on there all the time. I'll be there tomorrow morning with the great Jody Brar, one of my favorite interviews.
Oh, amazing. Yes. I want to actually put that Telegram in the video description as well, so it'll be there as we head out of here. So you heard them, folks. blackagendareport.com is in the video description. So is Garland Nixon's YouTube channel. Also, please do, if you're able to, support this channel. You can do that on Patreon, Substack, PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, and much more. Garland Nixon's Telegram is now in the video description too, so please do find it there. And with all that said, everyone, I'll be back on Monday actually with a great lineup. Low Key and Khadi Francis will talk about West Asia. It'll be a great show. That'll be 2 p.m. on Monday the 23rd. So stay tuned. I'll see you all again very soon. Thanks so much, Margaret and Garland, for joining tonight. It was a great conversation, and be well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. Goodbye.